So, a very warm welcome, Dr. Nikhil Sabu. So, I think, yeah. So, we'll start with a brief introduction about Dr. Nikhil Sabu. Dr. Nikhil Sabu has more than 8 years of experience in the area of payment engineering. He is currently handling 8 externally funded projects funded by various organizations such as Department of Science and Technology, Science and Engineering Research Board, National Rural Infrastructure Development Agency, Council of Science and Technology UP, National Highway Authority of India, and Ministry of Road Transportation and Highway. These projects are aimed towards understanding and solving different practical problems related to payment. He has many national and international collaborations with the leading research teams in the area of payment. He's currently working on 2 bilateral projects sponsored by DST with Austria and Belarus. He closely works with construction companies, NHAI and Public Works Department, UP, on various field-related problems and training their engineers. 2 of his works on use of pervious concrete for base layers and pothole-free bituminous mixtures have been approved by PWD and NHAI respectively. Production of pervious concrete paver blocks using reclaimed asphalt pavement material is one of his unique works initiated by his research group. He's a lifetime member of Indian Road Congress and also has contributed as an invited member for the Ethics Committee of IRC. He has delivered more than 20 invited talks on several topics in the domain of payment material and design. He has good knowledge on characterization of payment material, analysis and design of flexible and rigid payment and payment evaluation. He has worked with several softwares related to front and back calculations for flexible payment. He has various professional awards to his credit. These include the Best Paper Award at Conference of Transportation Research Group of India, CTRG 2015, Young Scientist in Civil Engineering by Venus International Foundation Achievement Award for Academician Scientist, Technologist, Innovator by Construction and Industry Development Council. He was also selected for KCC program for Young Leader Disaster Reduction course, which was organized by Japan International Cooperation Agency. He's a member of State Level Technical Advisory Committee for Urban Local Bodies of Uttar Pradesh. He's also a member of Scientific Committee Advances in Material and Payment Performance Prediction and European Asphalt Technology Association Conference. He is also a reviewer for many international journals such as International Journal of Payment Engineering, Journal of Material and Civil Engineering, ASCE, Construction and Building Material, Road Materials and Payment Design, International Journal of Payment Research and Technology, Mechanics of Time-Dependent Materials, etc. Dr. Sabu has published more than 35 technical papers in journals with SCI or Scopus Index of repute. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ankit. Thank you for this introduction. So let me very quickly share my screen first.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, sir. We can see, but you can just make it full screen.
Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so perfect. I hope it is visible to you. Okay, so a very good morning to all of you. Thank you again, Ankit, sorry to call you Ankit, Dr. Ankit, for the introduction. And thank you for inviting me to deliver this lecture during this program organized by IIT Jammu. Well, in the next 90 minutes approximately, I'll talk about the basic principles of flexible pavement design. My discussion will be more aligned towards understanding the steps involved in the development of a mechanistic empirical pavement design process. Now, these approaches, they usually remain the same with a few variations irrespective of any design process. So we will look into the fundamentals of few concepts which are very important, and most of the times they are ignored when a designer is relying only on codal specifications. So we'll be discussing about the code in the second half today. So I'll keep my discussion so that we can connect to both the presentations. And I hope that this presentation will be useful to students, faculty members, as well as if there are any practicing engineers. So let us start. So my presentation will cover the following aspects particularly. We will start with a very basic visualization of a flexible pavement and by defining it. We will then briefly look into the historical development that have taken place so far in the design of flexible pavement. Then we will try to understand the meaning of design in the design of flexible pavement. Traffic, it will be introduced in two forms, predicted traffic and allowable traffic. We will discuss in detail about the estimation or calculations of predicted and allowable traffic, and we will try to understand the importance of various parameters associated with them. This part of the presentation is the most important according to me. And then we will summarize what are the steps involved in the designing of flexible pavement. And finally, we will look into the future challenges ahead and the key takeaways from this discussion today. So well, with this menu in the presentation, let us start. So let us first start with the definition of flexible pavement and an understanding about its structure. In a very simple way, we can define a flexible pavement as a combination of bituminous mixtures, which is laid and compacted over a granular bed. And the bituminous mixture, it is a combination of aggregates and bitumen, which are heated, mixed, and compacted appropriately. Well, I choose this definition to put some stress, or you can say priority, to the bituminous layer in the flexible pavement, which is the most important and costliest component in the flexible pavement crust. There is something very interesting here. In a bituminous layer, we have approximately, say, 85 to 90% of aggregates and only 10 to 12% of bitumen by volume. But 70% of the cost of a bituminous layer, it comes from bitumen and only 30% from aggregates. This shows how important the small amount of bitumen is in the flexible pavement. Ankit, there is something projecting in the screen. I don't know, it's happening with me. Ankit, are you able to hear me? Maybe I'll minimize it.
Yeah, actually, I had forced unmuted all the audience, so I took time. Yes, I think there is some projection. I may allow the part, and I would request the host to please, take a control over it if you can.
Okay, so let us proceed then. Okay, so the bottom part. So the bottom part is the embankment commonly. Well, we can also have a pavement in cutting, but I am just showing here embankment, which is more common in nature. Subgrade can be considered as a part of the embankment or the natural soil in the top 500 mm. Now, the subgrade is also sometimes made up of select borrow soil to meet the density and strength requirement, which is higher than that of embankment. Next comes the subbase, and conventionally we use a granular subbase, which is laid and compacted in single or multiple layers. For example, we can have a filter layer and a drainage layer within the same subbase. We can also have a stabilized subbase depending on the requirement we have. Now, granular subbase, as you can see, is extended to the full width of the embankment. So it is extended to the full width. Above the subbase rests the base layer, and conventionally granular base is used. And we also do have options for other base layers such as cement treated bases and emulsion or foamed bitumen treated bases. This is followed by a prime coat, which is a spray application. Typically a medium curing cutback is used, and it is expected that the prime coat will fill the surface voids in the base layer. After priming, we apply another spray application, which is called as tack coat. Tack coat are usually emulsions and is applied to ensure proper bonding between two bound layers. So the next bound layer which comes over it is bituminous and is denoted as binder coats. Above this, we apply tack coat again. And the next bound layer is also bituminous and is termed as surface or wearing course. Now, this is the top layer of the pavement which you are seeing now. And sometimes an intermediate layer is also put between the binder and the surface course. So bituminous layer itself can be laid in 2 to 3 different layers. The vehicles move on the surface of the layer and they cause deformations. And the shoulders which run from the base layer to the surface layer, they can be made up of earth or they can be hard or you can say paved in nature. Now the flexible pavement, they do not have much flexural strength. So the load which is coming on the surface is transmitted through grain to grain contact. So it will be transmitted through grain to grain contact. Okay. Therefore, the different layers are involved in resisting the deformation within this structure. And so any form of deflection which happens at the bottom, you can see the same deflection at the top. Okay. So this is the basic overview of the flexible pavement. Now, before we design or before we define what design is in flexible pavement, let us quickly look into how pavement construction and design process started and they got developed. Now, prior to 1920s, the thickness of the pavement was purely based on experience. The same thickness was adopted for all the locations, irrespective of varying soil conditions in those locations. Now, as per the available records, the first asphalt roadway was constructed in Newark, New Jersey in US in 1870. Another available record mentions about the construction of a sheet asphalt in 1876. Now, this was constructed in Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Sheet asphalt, which I am just marking now, is a mixture of clean angular sand and bitumen. Now, here we have to note that the bitumen that were used during this period were natural bitumen and not manufactured bitumen. Manufacturing started only after 1900s. Since then, many design methods have evolved. Now, different design methods for determining the thickness of the pavement can be divided into 6 broad categories. They are empirical method, limiting shear failure method, limiting deflection method, regression equations based method, mechanistic empirical method, and purely mechanistic method. Now, in the empirical method, there are 2 subcategories: empirical method without any test on soil and empirical method with a test on soil. Now, an example of the first subcategory is the design of pavement using the public roads classification system, which came around 1929. In that system, the soil was classified as A1 to A8, A1 to A8 under uniform category, and B1 to B3 under non-uniform category. This was later modified through Highway Research Board classification system in 1945, in which the soil was classified as A1 to A7 and the pavement thicknesses were determined based on the soil type. The other subcategory under the empirical method is the one that uses CBR test for soil. Okay, so pavement thickness is determined based on CBR value of the soil. The pavement design in India also used this method initially, and then later we revised our specifications. Empirical method is highly dependent on the conditions, especially the loading condition, the environmental condition, and the material properties for which the method was originally developed. So they cannot be generalized for all the locations and they can give you unreliable results. In the limiting shear failure method that was developed around 1950s, the pavement thickness was based on the bearing capacity of the soil, in which the angle of internal friction, that is phi, and the cohesion of material, that is C, were used to determine the required thickness or the required strength. Now, this method, though fundamental in nature, it could not last for long, as it was found that the pavement should be designed for riding comfort and not merely for preventing shear failures. During the same period, around 1945 to 1955, limiting deflection method was also developed. The pavement thicknesses were determined to control excessive deflection in the surface of the pavement. Few design methods under the same category also considered subgrade deflection instead of surface deflection. But it is found that generally pavement fails by excessive stresses and strains and not only by deflection. Okay, so this is one of the demerit of this method. Now, during 1940s to around 1960s, the Highway Research Board, they conducted extensive field scale studies to understand the effect of various parameters on pavement design. One of the very famous road tests is the AASHTO road test, which laid the foundation for AASHTO pavement design. In this test or field scale test methods, regression equations were developed based on field data, which were further used for pavement design. One of the major disadvantages of this method is that the regression equations are location dependent and they cannot be reliably applied if these conditions are changed. The current method, which most of the countries, including India, is adopting, is the mechanistic empirical method. In this method, the response of the pavement structure in terms of stresses and strains are obtained using some mechanistic process, for example, using a linear elastic theory. Now, these response values are used to predict the life of the pavement from field observations. The commonly used responses which are correlated with pavement performance, they are the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer and the vertical compressive strain at the top of subgrade. We will discuss and we will talk about them in the further slides. The last method, which I have marked in yellow here, you can see, that is purely mechanistic method. This is a future dream to achieve, where we can design the pavement without the necessity of any field observations. But this, however, is very challenging in nature, considering that our materials which we use in the pavement, they are not linearly elastic in nature. They have a lot of variation. There are a lot of variables which control their performance and so on. Now, let us understand the steps of pavement design. Okay. So what is pavement design? Pavement design is nothing but finding the suitable layer thicknesses with some specified or assumed material properties such that the pavement can take the anticipated traffic up to a certain design period before failure. The keywords in this definition are marked, or they are made bold and they are underlined. Now let us understand them to understand the design process. Now the anticipated traffic and the design period, they fall under the same umbrella. Traffic in pavement design means only the commercial vehicles, that is trucks or say buses, which are more likely to cause damage to the pavement. So we need to predict the traffic for a given period. Now, the pavement should be designed such that the predicted traffic is less than the allowable traffic. Here, predicted traffic is determined after doing a traffic survey. We can do manual survey or we can use videography. So what are we doing? We are counting the traffic today and forecasting it for future. What about the allowable traffic? Allowable traffic is the amount of traffic that the pavement can take before failure. And what is failure here? It depends on how we are defining failure. One can define failure as occurrence of say 20% cracks, occurrence of say 20 mm rutting, and so on. So what are we doing? We are determining that after how many repetitions of trucks, my pavement will have 20% cracking, and after how many repetitions of trucks, my pavement will have 20 mm rutting, and so on. This allowable traffic is determined from performance models. Okay. In short, predicted traffic is determined from traffic survey and allowable traffic is determined from performance models. Okay. So in order to find the total amount of commercial vehicle that will come on the pavement, we have to perform a traffic survey. And we will use this equation for forecasting. What is this equation? This equation is T is equal to 365 into ADT, which is the average daily traffic, into 1 plus R to the power N minus 1 by R, where R stands for the rate of increase in traffic, N is the design period, into VDF, which is the vehicle damage factor, into LDF, which is the lane distribution factor. Now, what is VDF? Now, as we know that in a pavement, different types of truck, for example, single axle, tandem axle, and other multi-axle trucks will be moving. Now, VDF, it is used to convert the movement of all these different trucks into some standard truck. We will look how to do that. Now, VDF is used to convert the movement of all these different trucks to some standard truck. Also, in pavement design, we consider only wheel path for analysis, only wheel path. So we can understand that all the vehicles will not be traveling on the wheel path, right? Suppose if this is the pavement, if this is the wheel path, let us say, so all the trucks will not be moving. Some trucks will be moving here, some trucks will be moving here. So there will be a distribution of vehicular movement across the lateral surface of the road. So depending on how wide the road is, the amount of traffic that will travel on the wheel path, it will change. And we will consider only that proportion of traffic for design. This table, which is proposed by IRC, it shows the percentage of total commercial vehicles to be used depending on the type of road. Wider the road is, you will see less is the percentage. Okay. Now, the most important parameter in the calculation of predicted traffic is the value of R and VDF. Okay. Now, first, what we will do, we will first the present traffic has to be estimated using a traffic survey. So usually we do a 7-day, 24-hour count. The value of R, which is the rate of increase, it depends on many factors. The growth rate, it depends on many factors. It has to be precisely estimated using past trends, demand elasticity, and other factors. Okay. IRC 108, one can refer to IRC 108 for more details. Also, the growth rate has to be established for each category of vehicle. Okay. For example, the growth rate of a single axle truck can be different from the growth rate of a tandem axle truck, and so on. So for each category of vehicle, we should find what is the growth rate. The design life, on the other hand, that is the value of N, it depends on the type of facility we are designing. For national highway and state highways, it is usually 20 years. For other roads, it can be 15 years. If the pavement is anticipated to receive very high traffic, we can design a perpetual pavement also. Okay, we will discuss about perpetual pavement in the second half, which has a lifespan of more than 30 years. Okay, now let us talk about VDF. As I said, we will have different types of truck with varying axle configuration that will be moving on the pavement. Now, I want to convert the number of repetition of different trucks to the number of repetition of a standard vehicle, which in our case is a single axle truck with dual wheel set at the rear. Okay. The standard axle load is taken as 80 kilonewton with a tire pressure of 0.56 megapascals. Now, what is important for us is to understand the fundamentals of VDF. Now, let us start by defining it first. Okay. So, what is VDF? VDF is the damage per pass to a pavement by the axle in question relative to the damage per pass of a standard axle load, which is usually 80 kilonewton single axle load. Now, what does this mean? It means that the damage caused by this truck, which is a tandem axle, as you can see, is equal to how much damage caused by the standard axle truck. In other words, one pass of this vehicle is equal to how many passes of the standard axle truck at the same level of damage. And how is damage defined? traditionally, the fatigue model is used for defining the damage. This was considered in the Ashore test, from where the concept of VDF has been actually taken. What is NF? NF is the cumulative number of loading cycles in terms of ESAL to failure, and this is a function of epsilon T and E. What is epsilon T? Epsilon T is the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer, and E is the resilient modulus of the bituminous layer. Here, K1F, K2F, and K3F are regression model parameters. They are the regression model parameters. Okay. Now, later in this presentation, we will also discuss about the development of this model. Now, different researchers, or we can say research organizations, based on large amount of data, have found that the value of K2F is approximately equal to 4. What does this mean? This means from this equation that the fatigue life NF, is inversely proportional to the 4th power of the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer. Is not it? That we can clearly see. Now let us see how to use this information for calculation of VDF. So what is VDF? It is the number of repetition of equivalent standard axle load divided by the number of repetition of the axle load in question. Okay. Or the numerator can be written as NAT and the denominator as NX. Now from the model which is shown above, from this model, if you see, NAT is proportional to what? 1 by epsilon AT to the power 4, and NX is proportional to what? 1 by epsilon X to the power 4. Therefore, VDF can be written as epsilon X divided by epsilon AT to the power 4. Now, this is the fundamental definition of VDF we should remember. Now, if X and AT are of same axle configuration, that is, X is also a single axle load, say with a load of P1, you can see this is a single axle truck with dual tires. Let us say the load of this truck is P1. And this is our standard axle truck with dual wheels with a load of 80 kilonewton. If both are of same axle configuration, we can equate strain with load. Why? Since we know that E is equal to stress by strain, okay? Or from here we can say that strain is equal to P divided by A into E. So you can see strain is proportional to P. But this will happen when both are same axle configuration. This is also single axle and this is also single axle. Therefore, VDF for in this case can be written as how much? P1 divided by 80 to the power 4. So this equation I just converted to this equation. Okay. On the other hand, if X, let us say this vehicle is not a single axle, but of some other axle configuration. Let us say this is a tandem axle or tridem axle. We cannot equate strain with load directly. Okay. We cannot equate strain with load directly. In such cases, we have to do one extra analysis. So let us look at that. Say we want to convert this tandem axle load with a load of T1 to our 80 kilonewton standard axle load. So what I will do, first I will find out the tandem axle load for which epsilon because of the tandem axle load divided by epsilon because of our 80 kilonewton standard axle load to the power 4 is equal to 1. This is what I will find out through some linear elastic analysis. So researchers have already done this analysis. You can also do if you have some background on pavement analysis, and we can find out very easily that this load is equal to 148 kilonewton. What does this mean? This means that the strain at the bottom of bituminous layer with 80 kilonewton single axle load is same as the strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer with a 148 kilonewton tandem axle load. So Now we can calculate the VDF of any other tandem axle load. Let us do it for T1 because this is the example which we have taken. So as per our definition, we know that VDF is equal to epsilon T1 divided by epsilon AT to the power 4. If we divide the numerator and denominator by epsilon 148, what do we get? We get epsilon T1 divided by epsilon 148 divided by epsilon 80 divided by epsilon 148 to the power 4. Now here, the denominator, as we discussed in the previous slide, is equal to how much? 1, because this analysis we have already done. Therefore, VDF is equal to epsilon T1 divided by epsilon 148 to the power 4. Now, since T1 and the 148, they are of same axle configuration, that is, they both are tandem axle in nature. So now I can equate strain with the load directly. Okay. So what we get here, since T1 and 148 are of same axle configuration, so strain can be equated to load. Therefore, VDF is equal to T1 divided by 148 to the power 4. Okay. So similarly, we can carry out such analysis for tridem axle or any other axle in question. Okay, by doing some limited pavement analysis. Now, this table which you are seeing is given by IRC. This is also a resultant of such analysis. Okay, resultant of such analysis. So I hope this part is clear to you now, that how this table was created. Okay, now let us also see an example. This table shows the procedure for conversion of repetition of different commercial vehicle into repetition of equivalent standard axle load. The first column which you are seeing, the first column, okay, the first column, say it is the type of axle with their respective load. For example, this is a single axle single wheel with 70 kilonewton load. This is a single axle dual wheel with 120 kilonewton load. This is a single axle dual wheel with 90 kilonewton load. This is a tandem axle with 200 kilonewton load, and this is a tridem axle with 280 kilonewton load. Okay. The second column is the observed number of repetition based on the traffic survey. So this is what you observed during the traffic survey. For example, let us say you observed that there are 100 repetition of this vehicle. There are 150 repetition of this type of vehicle, and so on. Okay. Now the third column, this shows you the calculation procedure of converting the individual repetition into repetition corresponding to standard axle. So you can see that 1150 repetition of different commercial vehicles in this case is equal to 3101 repetition of equivalent standard axle load. So this is based on the traffic survey and the vehicle load spectrum. You can find out what is the total equivalent standard axle load. This next table, which you see is given in IRC 37 as a suggestive values of VDF. Okay. Now a word of caution here, that the guidelines, they do not actually recommend on using this table. Okay. Only in case of minor roads, if weighing pads are not available at the site, this table can be used as indicative values. This, however, is not a very generalized table. In fact, we have observed sometimes the VDF can be as high as 40 or 50. So we are done with our discussion here on understanding the calculation of predicted traffic. And I hope that this part was useful to you. Let us now proceed to the next step, that is understanding the allowable traffic. Okay. So once we know the anticipated or the predicted traffic, the next step is to find out the appropriate pavement composition such that the pavement does not fail before reaching the value of P. And what is failure here? As per IRC 37, failure is defined in terms of fatigue cracking and rutting. So we say that the pavement has failed in fatigue if the surface shows more than 20% cracks. And we say that the pavement has failed in rutting if the average rut depth on the wheel path of the pavement is greater than or equal to 20 mm. Okay. So in addition to the anticipated traffic, we are also interested to find out that after how many repetition of equivalent standard Excel load, the pavement will have 20% cracking and or 20 runtime. So how do we do that? We do that with the help of performance model. Now, since we have two failure modes, we have two performance model, fatigue model and rutting model. If you define three failure modes, you should have three performance models and so on. So let us start with the fatigue model first. So there are two fatigue models recommended by IRC, as you can see, model 1 and model 2. Okay. Now these models, they were developed from the R6 and R56 research schemes by taking observations from different pavement sections which were constructed in different parts of the country. You can see from the equation that the form of both the equations are same. The only difference is they have different coefficients, specifically K1, K1. Now, why these coefficients are different? Because this is based on the reliability level chosen for design. If the traffic for which the pavement is being designed is less than 20 MSA, then 80% reliability equation is chosen. While for higher levels of traffic, the 90% reliability equation is chosen. Now, this reliability, a very important note here, that this reliability are not the reliability in pavement design. Okay, they are the reliability levels of the models. What does this mean? You see that these models are developed through some regression analysis of data points in X and Y plane. Okay, 80% reliability equation can be visualized as a curve passing the data points in which 80% of the data points are above this curve, while in case of 90% reliability, 90% of the data points are above this model. I can pictorially show you this. So suppose this is some y and some x. Suppose you have taken so many datas which are scattered like this. Let us say I'm showing it in a very simple form though. Okay, so obviously you can pass two lines. You can say that okay, this is one model, and you can say okay, this is one model. So both the lines, they are passing through the points, but in the first case you have more data points, second case you have less data points above this line. So depending on this, the model parameters are supposed to change. Okay, another important thing here, that the fatigue model, if you see, it is a function of horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer and the modulus of the bituminous layer. Now, when the pavement is subjected to repeated loading, what happens? That horizontal strains are generated at the bottom of the bituminous layer because of the deflection of this layer. Now, these strains are accumulated over a period of time. Now, when this accumulated strain, they exceeds beyond the strength of the bituminous layer, it releases this stress by cracking. Okay, so the crack in the form of micro crack, it starts from the bottom, it coalesces with further repetition, and it rises to the surface. So it starts here and it rises to the surface. Okay, this is called as a bottom up cracking. And the fatigue model, which we have discussed, these two models which you are seeing now, okay, they are based on the bottom up cracking. However, the crack may also start from the top and propagate to the bottom. So there can be a case like the crack is starting from here and it is propagating to the bottom. This is called as top down cracking. Now, research have indicated that the top down cracking, it is a resultant of aging of the asphalt mixture and horizontal stresses at the edges of truck tires. It is expected that if appropriate binder is chosen and the mixed design of the bituminous layer is done properly, top-down cracking can be controlled or it can be eliminated. But currently, we do not have any performance model for top-down cracking. Okay, IRC only recommends the use of appropriate binder to control top-down cracking. So our discussion of the fatigue model is directed towards bottom-up cracking phenomena only. Okay. Now, if you see the fatigue model again, just see this equation. There is a parameter C which is introduced. You see, there is a parameter C. Okay. C, as you can see, it is a function of mixed volumetrics. How? You see, C is equal to 10 to the power m, where m is equal to 4.84 into VBE divided by VA plus VBE minus 0.69, where VBE is the volume of the effective bitumen in the bituminous mixture, and VA is the volume of the air voids in the bituminous mixture. So it is believed that the amount of binder in the mix, it plays a very critical role for the overall fatigue resistance. Now, this parameter C was initially recommended by Asphalt Institute, and we have just adopted it from them. Now the question is, how are these models developed, or how are they developed actually? If suppose tomorrow you want to develop it, how will you develop? So during the R6 and R56 scheme, different pavement sections were constructed in different parts of the country, okay, with varying cross-section and known material properties. Okay, so now we want to understand that how these models are developed. And why are we interested in that? Because in future, if someone wants to validate these models or propose a new model, one should first know about the process involved. Okay, so let us discuss that. So what are the steps? For different bituminous mixtures, which we will be using in the construction of pavement, what we will do, we will perform a repeated load 4-point beam bending test, okay, on those mixes. So in this test, usually a stress control test is used. What we will do, we will make multiple samples. Say we are making 9 samples, okay? So the first 3 samples will be subjected to a stress level of say sigma 1. The next three mixes are subjected to a stress level of sigma 2. And the last 3 samples are subjected to a stress level of say sigma 3. At each stress level, what we will do, we will note down the strain in the sample after the 200th repetition. Okay, so after the 200th repetition, we are expecting that nothing is happening to the material. So you can say this is the undamaged material, is in the undamaged state, and we are just noting down what is the tensile strain generated at the bottom of this layer, okay, using the deflection values after the 200 cycle. Then what we will do, we will also calculate what is the modulus or the value of E at the 200th repetition. Now, at each stress level, there will be certain loading cycles to failure. So how is this loading cycles to failure defined? So when you will perform the test, you will find that the modulus is decreasing with the increase in loading cycles. So the failure, this is suppose NF, okay, and this is, let us say, modulus. This was the initial modulus, and it is decreasing with the increase in number of loading cycle. So when this modulus becomes 50% of initial, 50% of E naught, we will note down this number of cycles. So this is nothing but the number of cycles to failure for that particular sample, for that particular stress level. So this is denoted as NF. Now what we will do, we will plot the variation of NF with the initial strain level. So this is the strain we recorded at the 200 repetition. So this can be for stress sigma 1, this can be for sigma 2, this can be for sigma 3. And for each sigma, we also know the number of cycles to failure. So we are noting down that, and we are just plotting the graph. Okay. Now this relationship for different values of modulus, they can be modeled using a very simple regression equation. Okay. So this is what NF is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon T to the power K2 into 1 by epsilon 1 to the power K3. Where here remember that ET is the initial strain at the 200th repetition, and E1 is the initial modulus at the 200th repetition. So they are the value of strain and modulus in the undamaged state of the material. Okay, but this model we have developed in the lab. Okay, so we will have to shift this model for field observations. How do we do that? As I mentioned, different pavement sections were constructed with varying material properties and thicknesses. So as the material properties and thicknesses are known, we can find the stresses and strains at different locations in the pavement using a layered analysis. This is usually done using IIT PAVE in India. We will have a demonstration in the second half. Okay. What we will do, we will place a 40 kilonewton because our standard axle is 80 kilonewton. So half of that dual tire 40 kilonewton with a 0.56 MPa load. This we will place on the top of the pavement in our computer. Okay. Next, using the layered theory, we will estimate the values of horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer. So at these different positions, to find out what is the critical value, we will find out what is the horizontal tensile strain for all these sections. So they all will the value of tensile strain in this will be different from this, will be different from this, because they are different pavement section with different thicknesses and different material properties. Okay. Now what we will do, we will just observe this pavement. We will go to the site and we will keep observing this pavement for many years. And what we will do, we will find out from the traffic data that after how many repetitions of equivalent standard axle load, 20% cracking has appeared. Now in different pavement section, we will have different values. For example, let us say in pavement section 1, after NF1 number of loading repetition, there was 20% crack. Similarly, in the second section, after NF2, 20% crack appeared, and in section 3, after NF3, 20% crack appeared. Now, this NF1, NF2, and NF3, they are actually what? They are the number of loading cycles to failure for field pavement sections. Okay. Now we will calibrate the lab model with the field data. Okay, how do we do that? So this is the basic equation of the fatigue which you are seeing. Now the values of K2F and K3F, which depends on the material sensitivity, is taken from laboratory analysis. That is the previous slide we talked about. Okay, which we have just discussed. Now epsilon T here is the horizontal tensile strain, which we found from IIT PAVE. We know the value of E1 as the material property is known. So the value of NF also we know from field observation, is not it? We know the value of NF. So we can calculate the shift factor and K1F by superimposing this model with the model we developed in the lab. And finally, we get the equation which looks like this. Okay. So these are the basic steps which are used to develop the performance model. Now, though we have discussed the outline of the process, or we have just discussed the outline, the actual process is very cumbersome and it is, not very, very straightforward. Okay. So if you are interested to know more, you can read few papers by Professor B.B. Pandey, Professor K.S. Reddy, and Professor Animesh Das, mostly produced by IIT Kharagpur, because these models were developed there. Process of using actual data from laboratory and field. Okay, so this is just an overview which we are discussing. In a similar way, we can develop the rutting model also. Now, in the rutting model, we use the vertical compressive strain on the top of subgrade. Vertical compressive strain. We denote this as epsilon Z. Okay. Now, why we are taking this as a representation for rutting? Because in layered system, there is an assumption that plastic deformations are proportional to elastic deformations. So whatever happens at the bottom, we can see it at the top. It is widely believed that rutting is a resultant from excessive vertical compressive strain on the top of the subgrade. However, there are also evidences that the rutting may be confined only to the bituminous layer, which means nothing is happening here, here, and here. Only in the bituminous layer, there is some rutting. Okay, but we currently do not have any model to consider this aspect. It is believed that if the aggregate gradation is proper, appropriate binder is selected, and the desired level of compaction is achieved in the field, rutting of this kind, which is confined to bituminous layer, can be eliminated completely. Okay. So coming back to the performance model, how do we develop this? Here also we will perform layered analysis on several pavement section. Okay. And note down the value of epsilon Z, that is the vertical compressive strain at the top of subgrade, which we get from the which we get from the layered analysis. We further observe the pavement for many years, and we will find out that after how many repetitions 20 mm rutting has appeared in this section. Let us say in this section, after NR1 repetition, 20 mm rutting came. In this section, after NR2 repetition, the rutting came. And in this section, after NR3 repetition, 20 mm rutting was observed. And I just plot this variation using a simple equation. Okay. And what you get finally, you get this rutting models. Okay. So this is how the rutting and fatigue models are developed. Okay. Okay. So having said this, now let us see what are the steps involved in the pavement design once we know this background. What I will do, I will put T is equal to NF and NR in the performance model. So NF I am getting from the performance model, and suppose this T is the anticipated traffic from traffic survey. So we have two equations, right? NF is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon T to the power K2 into 1 by E to the power K3. So you just put this K in place of NF and you find out what is the critical or the allowable tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer. Similarly, we have another model, NR is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon Z to the power K2. This is for rutting. So I will put again T in place of NR and I will find out what is the critical value of epsilon Z. So these are the allowable values for a given value of T. Okay. Then for a given set of material properties, now I have the value of critical tensile strain and critical vertical compressive strain. Then what we will do, we will assume a pavement section in which the material properties are known, and we will start with some assumed thickness. We will assume some thicknesses of different layers. Okay. And we will perform the layered analysis. After performing the layered analysis, we will find out what is the value of epsilon T here and what is the value of epsilon Z here. Okay. So this actual epsilon T and epsilon Z, which is coming because of this pavement section, it should be less than the critical values. If it is not less than the critical values, we will change the layer thickness, and we will keep doing that till we get an appropriate combination of thicknesses such that epsilon T and epsilon Z, it is less than epsilon T critical and epsilon Z critical. Okay. So that is all about the steps involved in the pavement design. Here, sometimes what we have observed that for thin bituminous layers, typically when it is less than 30 mm, 40 mm or 50 mm, first, with increase in thickness, first the strain will be compressive in nature. As you keep increasing the thickness, the strain will increase. Okay, it will come to 0, it will rise to a maxima, and only after a particular thickness, the strain will decrease with increase in thickness. Okay, so if you are in this zone, if the strain are coming as compressive, this means the pavement is very thin to take up any structural load. So it is not, contributing towards the fatigue resistance. Rather, that layer is just acting as a, only serving the functional requirement for riding comfort. So this is also something we have to remember while we are doing the pavement analysis. Now, when we discussed about the predicted traffic, we talked about VDF, is not it? Which is used to convert the different axle types to a 80 kilonewton standard axle load. Now that is one way. Is it possible to define failure considering different axle types separately and not converting them through VDF? Yes, it is possible. Now, one of the common method is the one we use in concrete pavement design, that is by using the Miner's law of failure. Now, this is also known as cumulative fatigue damage approach. Okay. So what is cumulative fatigue damage approach? This is This was initially coined by M.A. Minor in 1945. I'm sorry, I think, yes. So what is cumulative fatigue damage? This is the summation of NFI, where Ni is the expected number of load repetition for a given axle load category. For example, we know from traffic survey how many repetitions will be there for single axle, tandem axle, or tridem axle. So that is that value of Ni. And NFI, it is the allowable number of load repetition before failure corresponding to a particular load under that axle category. So here also we have something called expected traffic and allowable traffic. Okay. So in this formula, which you are seeing, the small ni, it is obtained from traffic survey, while capital Ni is obtained from performance model. So suppose we are considering 3 axle types, single axle, tandem axle, and tridem axle, then we have 3 summation terms with 3 Nis and 3 NFIs, which means suppose I am considering single axle, so one will be single axle by N of single axle plus summation of N of or you can remove this, tandem axle by capital N of tandem axle plus N of tridem axle by capital N of tridem axle. So this summation, it should be less than 1. Okay, which means since we need 3 allowable traffic here, so we should have at least 3 performance models, okay, which we currently do not have. So we are using the VDF based procedure. Now, one application of this approach, why we are discussing this, that one application of this approach is also used in flexible pavement when we are dealing with cement treated bases, when we have something called an unconventional base, which is a cement treated base. So let us see how this cumulative fatigue damage is applied in flexible pavement when we have a cement treated base. Okay, so here while doing the analysis, in addition to the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer and the vertical compressive strain at the top of the subgrade, we also need to find out the horizontal tensile stress and the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of the CTB. Okay, so we have to find out the value of sigma also. We have to find out the value of epsilon also. Okay, now for finding out the stresses and strains in CTB, IIT PAVE analysis is done, but with a tire pressure of 0.8 MPa instead of 0.56. So while doing this analysis, we will place a 40 kilonewton load, but with a 0.8 MPa tire pressure. This is the difference in the analysis. Okay. Why? Because, these two models are generally used in the application of cumulative fatigue damage. And these models, the first model is taken actually from Australian guidelines, and the second model from MEPTG. So these models, they are calibrated at 0.8 MPa tire pressure. And because these are calibrated models, we have to stick to the procedure, on which these models are actually applicable. So what we will do here in case of cement treated bases, first we will find out the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of the CTB. Now, first we'll find out the horizontal tensile strain. This value of epsilon T, we will put in this equation, the first equation. Okay. And using this, we will calculate the value of N. Now, this N, which we get, value of T, which is the predicted traffic. Okay. Now, this is the first check which we will do. Next, we will perform the cumulative fatigue damage analysis. So let us see how we do that. Okay. For that, we will need the axle load spectrum data. Now, in the axle load spectrum data, we will have what? A single axle spectrum load data, a tandem axle spectrum load data, and let us say a tridem axle load spectrum data. Here, one passage of tandem axle is considered as 2 passage of single axle with half the load on each axle. Okay. And one pass of tridem axle is considered as 3 passes of single axle with 1/3 the load on each axle. So what we will do, we need to find the tensile stress at the bottom of CTB, that is the value of sigma, okay, at CTB for different Excel loads using the IITPF software. Now, please note here that this is not the 40 kilonewton load which you will keep here while doing the analysis. Okay, we will find out the stresses for each load under different Excel category. We will discuss about this in the next slide. Since we know the modulus of rupture of this CTB, you see here, you know this MRUP, this is the modulus of rupture of the CTB. We know this because we know the material property. We will use the second equation to find out NFI. We will find out NFI. Okay, this, what is this NFI? This NFI is the allowable number of load repetition, and sigma T we are already finding out from IIT PAVE. Okay, then for each load category we will calculate the ratio of expected to allowable number of load repetition, which quantifies the failure. Okay, and the summation of CFD for different Excel load group, it should be less than 1. Now let us see a very simple example to understand my complicated words which I have just placed before you. Say this example, in fact, I have taken from IRC 37 2018. So say this is the Excel load spectrum data which is collected. Okay, the expected repetition is 4. So this expected repetition which you see, so this is single Excel, tandem Excel, tridem Excel. The expected repetition which you are seeing are forecasted values for the design period. Okay, now you see the first 2 sets for single Excel load. Okay, so for the single Excel load of 190 kilonewton, the first one, so the mid value is 190 here. The expected repetition is how much? 70,000, which I can see here from traffic data. Okay, now using 190 kilonewton single Excel load in IIT PAVE, so what we will do, we will do a layered analysis, but we'll place here a 190 kilonewton single Excel load. Okay, 190 kilonewton single Excel load. In IIT PAVE, we will find out the stress below the CTB layer. Okay, what we will do, we will find out the stress below the CTB layer. If you do that, you will get the value as 0.7 MPa. Now divide this by the modulus of rupture. Okay, divide this by the modulus of rupture, which here is taken as 1.4 MPa. So when you divide 0.7 divided by 1.4, you will get as 0.5 MPa. Okay, now you use this value in the second equation, which is the MEPDG equation, and you find out NFI. So you use this value, place it here. You know this value also. Okay, sorry. So you know this value, you put this value in place here because this is the stress ratio, and you find out the value of NFI. Once you do that, you will get as 5.26 into 10 to the power 5. Okay, then what is the fatigue life? Small ni by capital Ni, that is small ni is 70,000. 70,000 divided by 5.26 E5, that is equal to 0.13. Similarly, you calculate for 80 kilonewton and so on. So you calculate for all the other values. Okay, so you will find out the value of CFD here for single Excel. Then what you do? Then we will come to tandem Excel. So let us see again one example for tandem Excel. Now here you can see the first case, 360 kilonewton tandem Excel load. It has an expected repetition of 2,40,000. Now if I assume that one tandem Excel is equal to 2 standard Excel, the number of repetition will get doubled, is not it? So it becomes 4,80,000. It becomes 4,80,000. Also, the load will become half, is not it? Because I am taking only half of the load. So instead of 360, I will take 180 while doing the layered analysis. So using the 180 kilonewton load in IIT PAVE, I will find out what is the stress at the bottom of CTB, and you will get as 0.67, calculate the stress ratio, calculate the fatigue life, calculate the fatigue life consumed. So similarly for tridem Excel also, the repetition will become 3 times. So you see this is for 43,000 into 3, which is written here. And instead of 480 kilonewton, how much load you will put? 480 divided by 3 while doing the analysis. So that is equal to how much? 160 kilonewtons. Okay. And again, you find out the stress ratio, fatigue life, consumed. And you do this for whole column, for this column, for this column, for this column, and you calculate what is CFD here, which is summation of all this, CFD here, summation of all this, and so on. Okay. We will do this for all columns and sum up the values of Ni divided by NFi. Now this should be less than 1. This should be less than 1. If it is not less than 1, what we will do? We will increase the thickness of the different layers. Okay. So I hope that this whole part is also clear, where we have talked about the basic principles of the pavement design. Now here I have obviously not discussed about the detailed analysis or the linear elastic theory, because we want to connect our first presentation with the second presentation, which is based on the design using IRC 37. So whatever fundamentals we should know within the IRC 37, so I thought of presenting that in the first half. So here, finally, what do we learn? First, we learned about the definition of pavement. What is pavement design? We understood what is predicted traffic and allowable traffic. We also talked about the fundamentals of VDF, then the fundamentals of performance models, or you can say fundamentals of finding out the allowable traffic. And finally, because we have some unconventional bases these days, like cement treated bases, so we also talked about an alternate definition of failure, like cumulative fatigue damage principle. However, there are further challenges in the pavement design which we do today. The first challenge is that these models which we have talked about, they were developed long back when the schemes were there, which were sponsored by Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Now, since then, our pavement construction options for different layers, they have changed drastically. The type of surface layer which we used to use in those days, we no longer use today. So these models, which were developed and calibrated based on the pavement section constructed long back, may not be applicable to those pavements which are being constructed and operated today. So there is a question about the validation of these models for the present condition. So some more data, not some more, in fact, a very rigorous amount of data should be collected, should be analyzed in a similar fashion, what we did previously, so that we are able to validate the model. Okay. Also, in the present design procedure, we do not consider incremental damage over a period of time, which means that suppose the modulus of the pavement is, or modulus of any layer in the pavement is X today. So after few months or after a year or after 2 years, it will no longer be X again, because environmental factors would have come, degradation because of the load would have taken, and the modulus of the pavement or the particular layer would have reduced. So we are currently not designing our pavement for incremental damage over a period of time, which is again one of the very challenging tasks to achieve, specifically for our conditions in India. Another problem with the design, that we do not use the environmental parameters into consideration. Suppose a pavement is constructed in Jammu, let us say, with relatively lower temperature. Suppose a pavement is constructed in Rajasthan with some extreme climates. They cannot be same, right? Because the type of material we want to use in those pavements will change depending on the this temperature stresses which are going to come. The level of moisture can be different from places to places. Some places are very high than the water table. Some places fall within the water table. So for all these environmental conditions, monsoon periods are not same. Some places receive rainfall for a longer period of time during the year. Some places do not receive rainfall for a longer period of time. So the pavement design should have some process of considering these environmental parameters within the analysis framework. Okay. Another challenge is the use or considering the actual property of the material. For example, right now we use Burmester layer analysis, which considers that our material, let us say granular base, granular sub base, they are linear elastic materials. However, they are not. For example, in granular materials, they are highly dependent on the confining pressure we are giving to it. So the properties of the same material, the same thickness will change depending on the stress condition. Okay, depending on the boundary conditions. So we are currently not considering, for example, bituminous layer, they are viscoelastic in nature. However, we do not consider this aspect when we are designing the pavement. Okay, the another aspect which may not be very important, but yes, it is a futuristic thing, is to consider the dynamic loads in the analysis. Right now, if you remember, we talked about epsilon T, epsilon Z, and so on. So this analysis is performed by keeping a static load over the top surface of the pavement and then looking at the stresses and strains. But in the actual field, my vehicles are moving at different speeds. Sometimes vehicles are moving at 80 kilometers per hour. Sometimes vehicles are moving at 40 kilometers per hour. Sometimes the vehicles are standing still, piled, one after another. So in all these cases, the magnitude of stresses and strains which are going to be generated in different locations will be significantly different. Okay, so we also need to see how we can incorporate the effect of dynamic loads in our analysis framework. Well, with these challenges and what we learned, I would like to now end my presentation and open up the platform for questions if you have any. Thank you so much. Over to you, Ankit.
Yes, hi, I'm there. Thank you, Dr. Nikhil. I would request the participants to raise their hand, and the host will unmute you once you raise your hand for questions, if any. Yeah. Dr. Nikhil will wait for a minute for them to respond. Yeah.
Yes.
If they have any question. What's his name? Mr. Ujjwal Solanki. So he has raised his hand. Harpreet, I would request you to unmute him. Yeah, over to you, Ujjwal.
Yes, sir. Excellent lecture, sir. In a short period of time, everything you have explained about this payment design philosophy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, the question is, as per your lecture, the ISC 37 criteria, we design the payment, we provide the material as per the criteria, and whatever we traffic we have considered. But later on, within a short period of time, or maybe 1 or 2 years, because we design a 10-year or maybe 15 or 20 years, but payment is not performing as it has to be, and it's maybe rutting or maybe cracking. There are a number of issues, as we know. So my question is how to identify the causes of failure, why it is fail, where we lack, either is an
Thank you for this question. Yes, so this is actually a very interesting question and one of the very difficult questions to answer, in fact, because you see this failure in pavement, what we have been observing, it does not depend on a single factor. For example, we have seen pavement which had very good materials, very good mixed design. Let us say the soil CBR was very high, okay, but those pavement also can fail if the construction is not done properly. So in fact, most of the times we observe that construction is one of the very significant parameter which directly affects the performance. For example, I will tell you, I was just looking at some case studies which were done in India by some of my friends. So they said they found that a location somewhere near Hyderabad, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so those locations, they performed extremely well, though they did not have good materials. So this was a very interesting case study. So finally, they found that the compaction of different layers was done in such a manner. So, I mean, the compaction was very, very good in nature, which made this pavement layer stiff enough to take or to distribute the loads more properly. So what they concluded that instead of materials, compaction plays the primary role in controlling the performance of the pavement. But I mean, I mean, we can keep on discussing the reasons why the pavement fails despite of doing a good pavement design, considering materials and so on. But there are many factors involved. Sometimes the engineers will lack in selecting the appropriate material. Sometimes the contractors won't put the amount of bitumen which is required. In case of, let us say, emulsion, they will use an emulsion with low quantity of bitumen and more quantity of water. So lack of choosing material properties, for example, sometimes aggregates are chosen and the contractor tends to put aggregates which are marginal in nature, though initially they will show that it is not marginal in nature. So those kind of activities are there. Then sometimes the pavement design can be wrong, the mix design can be wrong, because mixed design of bituminous mixture is very critical when we relate it to performance. So a poor mix design can lead to poor performance. And then comes the construction. So construction is you can say the foundation to correlate with performance. So if we are choosing good materials, good design, but not constructing it well, the pavement will again fail. So this is what we usually see based on our limited experience. Was this your question? I'm sorry, I thought that this was your question.
I think Ujjwal, are you there? Yes. Anyways. I think maybe he has muted himself.
Okay.
So, Dr. Nikhil, we'll just wait for 30 more seconds. If anybody has a question, let them raise their hand. And okay, there is a question in the chat box that,
okay,
sir, will the VDF change with pavement composition?
Oh, yes, I can see that question. Okay, so will the VDF change with pavement composition? Actually, right now, our VDF is not actually related with the pavement composition, because there is no pavement. When we determine the VDF, actually, we don't have any pavement that time. We have only traffic. So it's like, you are going to construct a pavement in some location. So sometimes people ask that, then where are we actually finding out the traffic, or where are we measuring the traffic? So if a pavement is there and you are trying to make a new highway on that, so or we will do the traffic count in a road which is similar to that kind of road. So when we do the traffic count, just looking at the axle load spectrum data and the types of axles which are coming, we calculate the VDF. So VDF has nothing to do with the composition of the pavement. This is just like converting the repetition of one type of vehicle to the repetition of some other type of vehicle.
Okay, sir. I'll again, because since we have time, I'll again wait for 30 more seconds. If anybody has any question, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Just in case, if you don't have mic facility, you can type your question in the chat box and we'll take it. We'll wait for another 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah, we have one question. Will the soil parameters affect VDF? No, again, you see, VDF is not actually dependent. The current definition of VDF is, what is VDF? Actually, it is a ratio of strain because of different loads, is not it? So for a given pavement section, the relative ratio should remain the same. So right now the definition of VDF which we are actually using, it does not consider the soil parameters. It does not consider the pavement composition. It only considers the spectrum data or the traffic data which you have.
Okay. So I think Dr. Nikhil, no, there are no other questions.
Okay.
So maybe then we can take a small break, and a heartfelt thanks to you for the first lecture. Of course, because of your busy schedule, you have at least agreed to take two
Thank you
lectures.
actually for shifting my lecture today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm really thankful that it will be 3 hours of lectures, and I'm really you are a motivation to all of us. That okay, giving 3 hours of lecture, it's not easy. I completely understand that. So with this, sir, thank you, and maybe we can take a break till 2:30, and we start with the next talk around 2:30. Will that be fine, sir?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Sure. Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir. Thank you. And I request the participants, they can take this lunch break and join back around 2:25. Okay. Just to be, 5 minutes early. Thank you, everyone.